Hi, and welcome to CSCMP's Member Mondays. I'm your host, Timothy Pajak, and I'm the Membership Engagement Manager here at CSCMP. We're pleased to have Tom Clark, Supply Chain and Logistics Practice Leader at Direct Recruiters, as our guest. Tom also serves as President of the CSCMP Cleveland Roundtable. Tom, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Tim.
I look forward to our conversation. Let's just jump right into it. So when I was reviewing your profile for our conversation, one thing that stood out to me was your military experience, because one of my brothers served in the 82nd Airborne as well. And there's so many parallels between the supply chain profession and military service. Tell us a little bit about your journey from military service to the supply chain and how you got to join CSCMP.
Well, you mentioned the 82nd, the unit your brother was in. That's actually the unit that I spent most of my active duty time in, and the unit that I affiliate with the most. That's the one I deployed with. So my journey and how it came together, I actually started in ROTC, the Reserve Officer Training Corps, at John Carroll University. And I knew I wanted to be in the military, but I didn't necessarily know how that was going to come into play. But I took an elective, and it turned into the pathway to me getting into the military and becoming an Army officer. I was studying business management, but also logistics for my dual major when I was at John Carroll. So that was a plan. And certainly when I was planning things out as to what I wanted to do in the military and what I wanted to do beyond that, I chose the Quartermaster Corps, which is kind of the supply chain and logistics of the military. But I did it by way of the branch detail program, which meant that I would spend my first couple of years as an infantry officer. I had a mentor that was an airborne ranger, and I wanted to be an airborne ranger, and that's what happened. I ended up as an airborne ranger and served in the 82nd Airborne Division, and then later in my career, I transitioned to the Quartermaster Corps, and the way that kind of came together, I would say that as a young Army officer, I did more supply chain and logistics when I was an infantry officer in the 82nd, deploying to combat in Afghanistan, and certainly leading troops in combat, but also having the opportunity to make sure that we were supported in every way that we needed to. I kind of wore a couple of different hats too, in particular when I was deployed. And then later in my career in the military, I had come back from that deployment, and we were still very much in Operation Enduring Freedom and the subsequent wars that happened after that. And so spent a lot of time really sharing what my experience was like as part of CASCOM, the Combined Armed Support Command for the United States military, and sharing ideas and best practices of what was needed to support the combatant commander on the ground and how military supply chain could support that. So it came together really nicely and set me up for a good transition to corporate America.
Absolutely. Thank you for your service. And now you work in recruiting. What advice would you have for military members of CSCMP to take advantage of their membership, especially those who might be transitioning back to civilian life?
Yeah. So before I got into recruiting, I went into supply chain, and as I said, in corporate America, and then a nonprofit health system and different things, and a privately held company. But I went through a transition recruiter. I interviewed with a bunch of different companies and different things, but CSCMP does some great stuff to help our veterans. And so I would say become a member, get engaged, take advantage of the discounted membership that you get for that service. Do it while you're on active duty. If you can make it to a conference, come to a conference. The three pillars of what supply chain, what CSCMP does in terms of connecting and training and developing, and how we can help military officers, military non-commissioned officers, and enlisted transition by getting them connected with. And that's number one. I mean, first and foremost, getting connected with folks in the space and learning the terms and how your experience does play into that is huge. And then learning what's going on in the civilian sector and how your experience can support that. So I think CSCMP's offers some great things to transitioning military, and I would encourage them to take advantage of them, join, get engaged. If there's a roundtable near you, get engaged in that. Certainly if you can come to the EDGE conference and get engaged. Right now in this virtual world that we live in, you can take advantage of it in a lot of different time zones too.
Yeah, speaking of things that might be going on in the supply chain world, what technologies or trends or disruptive forces do you see having the biggest impact on supply chains, that whether you're a military member or any other member, what things should they be up to date on?
Yeah, well, let's start with the disruptor, because obviously we went through 2020 with a pandemic and massive disruption to the supply chain and a lot of effects that followed that, and that increased significantly the demand for supply chain talent, the demand for visibility and the ability to support your supply chain. So if supply chain in an organization didn't have a seat at the table prior to the pandemic, they were looking to open up a chair at the table for the supply chain leader. And if the supply chain leader had been asking for things, visibility tools, technologies, and there's so many different things that you could do, diversifying to build resiliency in your supply chain, and having very clear pictures all the way back from natural resource all the way forward to the end consumer and that value chain, wanting visibility in that. So there's so much that some companies had a handle on and were aggressively going after before the pandemic. Coming out of it and into 2021, the demand in my business of recruiting for chief supply chain officers and their teams, which is one of my specialties, is huge. And so whether it was they had the right leader and now they needed to support them with a bigger team or right technology, or they didn't and they were looking for a new leader, it's been that disruption that has been a game changer for supply chain. And so I always say people want good people in good times, but in tough times, they need good people. And certainly there's a lot of demand for top supply chain talent right now.
What's been the biggest challenge for you as a recruiter in finding that talent?
There's a shortage of top talent, right? So the biggest challenge for me, I think, is sometimes when an organization is about to go on a journey that they need to change something, they know there's a problem, and we solve that by partnering and going together in that. But one challenge, if I think about very specifically in my role, not to talk too much about work, but if I talk very specifically about my role, the challenge when we go on a journey and halfway through or some segment through the journey, that there's an adjustment in what they need. And I don't mind that, as long as we partnered together and we went through the journey together. We experienced here's what we were looking for, here's this new problem that we have, and we make an adjustment together. It's challenging if that's done in a vacuum, but for our good clients, there's a good partnership there, and so that helps. And certainly my experience with CSCMP and being able to talk to so many people that are in our profession every day. I mean, that is what I do in my day job. That is what I do as a volunteer leader in CSCMP, is I talk to supply chain professionals. So it gives me the ability to help other CSCMP members, and then in my business, help my clients know, here's what some other folks are doing, and here's how some other folks handled it. So hopefully that answers your question. It's a challenge, and kind of, here's how we're trying to get through it.
Thank you so much. That is all the time we have for today. Tom, I appreciate your membership and your continued leadership with CSCMP. Thanks for joining us for this edition of Member Mondays.
Tim, I appreciate you having me. Can I close with one plug for CSCMP? Thank you. If you're watching this video because you're visiting, CSCMP's website or something, and you're thinking about joining, I would tell you, do it, take the initiative and join, and you'll get out of it what you put into it. If you aren't a passive member, go visit something. Sign up right now online to watch a virtual meeting, participate in a virtual meeting somewhere else, go to your local roundtable, sign up to go to EDGE, volunteer to be a volunteer leader and contributor in the organization. You will get so much more out of it as a direct reflection, a return on investment of the time and commitment that you put into it. That's been my experience in the significant time that I've been involved in CSCMP, and I'd welcome you to join us and help make our profession and our organization better. Thanks, Tim.
Thank you, Tom. Appreciate it.